let's today talk about one of the complicated challenges I'm sure everyone encounter at times, the questions related to acid-base balance, imbalance issues. So let's see how we can understand and answer such questions more effectively using some information and some techniques we're going to go through. So first of all, let's look to see what this acid-base imbalance is all about. So let's use our PowerPoints here to understand a little bit more closer with acid-base balance. And as we can see, all right, so acid-base balance, yeah, the underlying concept, like for us to survive, for us to function, our body fluids must have a certain balance, or what we call as the equilibrium or the homeostasis, right? So all body fluids should have that balancing mechanism. Okay? And so one of the major indicator of that criteria is what is a pH, which is the unit for measurement of the acidity or alkalinity of whatever substance we have. Okay? I mean, whatever body fluids. And eventually we're going to focus on blood itself, okay, which is the major indicator of our acid-base status. And if it goes out of range, we know what can possibly happen. So let's look into this image we have right here. So as we can see in this image, yes, the pH you can see has a normal range, right, which is what 7.35 to 4.5, and then you can see when it's less than that, it is acidosis. When it goes more, it is alkalosis. And look to see, I mean, our body cannot survive beyond a certain limit. Like if it goes below 6.8, I mean, that is severe acidosis, or if it goes above 7.8. Body cannot survive. I mean, death would be the result, as we can learn from here. All right, so let's look to see a little bit more information before we go and work out some questions and look to see how this is getting seen in our endless questions or other nursing licensure exam questions. Okay. So this is how our body, balance or maintain our acid-base status. So there are, as you can see, there are three major mechanisms involved in this process. The first one is the excretion of, first of all, remember, the major organs involved are the lungs, kidneys. Those are the two major organs, right? And I'm going to show you right here. Here we go. Yeah, so these are the two major organs, right? The lungs and kidneys, they work together to maintain or compensate the acid-base balance. And how does it actually do that? And that's what is being explained here. So the lungs, the only function or the major function of the lungs in the acid-base balancing is by regulating the carbon dioxide. Yeah. So if the body goes into acidosis, the lungs can expel the carbon dioxide, and whereas if the body goes into alkalosis, it can retain the carbon dioxide. I mean, if you look into various clinical situations, you might understand. I mean, think about what happened with a patient in going through COPD exacerbation. I mean, to be specific, going through asthma exacerbation. What is happening there? So the patient has bronchospasm, so that the carbon dioxide that is building up. I mean, by the way, where does carbon dioxide come from? It comes from the metabolism, right? It comes from the tissue metabolism. So that carbon dioxide which is coming out from the tissues, which is supposed to be excreted or expelled through the lungs, if our bronchi are constricted or obstructed, is not able to go out. I mean, that's what is asthma exacerbation. So body can retain the carbon dioxide and body goes into a state of acidosis. That's what we call as respiratory acidosis. Yes, we're going to come into that in just a few minutes. So yes, again, so this is how lungs normally work it out. Yes, it excretes the carbon dioxide or retain it. Yes, so we'll see the later situation. By the way, this class is particularly focusing on understanding the identification of the acid-base imbalance. We are not really going into the causes or the management as such, because it would be a very long lesson for us to go through. All right, so again, we heard this is how the lungs will work out the acid-base status through regulating the carbon dioxide. And whereas the other major organ involved, as we heard, is the kidneys, right? Okay. So how does it do that? It excretes hydrogen ion or retain the bicarb. Okay. So again, so think about our bodies going through acidosis because of a metabolic problem. The best example you can probably consider, which you might be clinically able to relate, would be diabetic ketoacidosis. What is happening? Kidney is not able to get the acidic products out, because when there is what we call diabetic ketoacidosis, body starts to build up ketones. Ketones are acidic, and the kidney cannot effectively get it out or balance it. So that's where body goes into a state of acidosis. So normal case, kidneys will excrete the extra hydrogen ion and retain bicarbonate, if it goes into acidosis. And if it is in alkalosis, it will be the opposite process. Yeah, it will excrete the hydrogen ion and retain the, if it goes into metabolic alkalosis state, it can retain more hydrogen ion and excrete the bicarbonate. Yes, so that's how we do balance. Again, as we move forward, we'll get a better picture of the whole situation. Okay. So that's with the two major organs involved in the balancing, again, lungs and kidneys. And then a third mechanism, what we call buffering mechanism. You don't really see much questions based on buffering in questions based on my experience, but just to have a picture of everything, right? Yeah, we should be aware of everything at least to some extent. Yes. So buffering, it's what is buffer? It's like a substance that can kind of neutralize or can reduce the acidity or the alkalinity, which could be present in our blood. Yes, that's what you see here. So buffering mechanism is a substance that prevents body fluids from becoming overly acidic or alkaline. Okay. And that includes various products, as you can see: carbonic acid, sodium bicarb buffer, phosphate buffer system, protein buffer system. Again, good to know it in too much, in further detail, but we're going to not focus much on that at this time. At least be aware this is how our body balances the acid-base status through the lungs, through the kidneys, and through the buffering mechanisms. But this lesson will be primarily focusing on the balancing by lungs and kidneys. All right, so let's continue here. Yes, we already saw this image. Yes, so the two major organs involved in the balancing process. And again, let me just bring you into that situation that you're more familiar. I already mentioned a diabetic patient going through ketoacidosis. Look to see what is happening there. As I told you, body starts to build up ketones. Ketones are acidic, and the kidney is not able to resolve the problem. Then lungs try to resolve that, and that's what you see as that hyperventilation, or what we call as Kussmaul respiration. I'm sure every single of you would be familiar with the term Kussmaul respiration, which is nothing but a state of hyperventilation, an effort to get extra carbon dioxide out. So, the acidity that has been generated because of a metabolic disturbance, now the lungs will try to balance by expelling the extra carbon dioxide. And we'll see how it actually works as we move forward. All right, so so this is what we kind of heard so far. Yes, so the normal, so the pH, that's the most important value, right, which determines the acid-base status. So the normal value, 7.35 to 7.45, and we call it acidosis if the value is less than 7.35, or if, okay, so again, it can happen if there is too much, the pH goes low, which can happen from, expelling the bicarb, too much of bicarb, or by retaining the carbon dioxide. And whereas alkalosis is from lack of hydrogen ion, or too much retention of bicarbonate. So that's how the imbalance happen. Okay, and we'll get a better picture moving forward. Yes, so this kind of what we already heard. Yes, so remember our range. Yeah, that is 7.35 to 7. Excuse me. So yes, I'm sure we know this. The safe range 7.35 to 7.45. Okay. So, and within that safe range, you see 7.4. That's like the center, right? The perfect middle. So if someone is in the perfect state of acid-base status, this is where our pH, the blood pH, should be. Okay. So when it goes lower, 7.35, 7.38, 37, and so on. So going on towards 3.5, it is kind of leaning towards the acidic side, right? Even though it is within normal, until it crosses the 7.35, it is still within the acidotic side. Acidotic side. Okay, and we're going to see significance as we move forward. And the same when it goes up, you can see up to 7.5. 7.45. Even though if it is alkaline, even up to 7.45. Even though it is normal, it is leaning towards the alkalotic side. Okay. So yeah, that's what you see. Acidosis to the left and alkalosis to the right. Yes. Now, what do we need to work out our acid-base questions? And so these are the values we usually talk, right, in reference to the acid-base status when we have our ABG done. So these are the values we might be getting, which includes the pH, and I'm sure everyone know 7.35 to 45, PCO2 35 to 45. Look at that values. I mean, see 35, 35, right? 45, 45. So I'm sure if you relate to that, you cannot never forget the pH and the PCO2 connection, right? Right there. You got it? Okay, good. Okay. And then bicarb 22 to 26 MEQ per liter. And then partial pressure of oxygen 80 to 100. And a saturation, oxygen saturation 95 to 100. And so just to explain a little bit more about what these values indicate, let's look here on the screen. Okay, so we'll get a little bit more picture. So yeah, the very first one, that's pH. It indicates the acidity or alkalinity based on the hydrogen ion present in the blood. I mean, we already heard that, right? When we goes into acidosis, body is retaining more hydrogen ion, right? And the hydrogen ion decreases, it going towards alkalosis. And that is PaCO2. It indicates the amount of carbon dioxide dissolved in the arterial blood. But now, something very important for you to understand, carbon dioxide, anytime you talk about carbon dioxide, it is acidic. Because why? When carbon dioxide, when it dissolves in water or it dissolves in blood, it forms carbonic acid. So that's why anytime you talk about more CO2, I mean, remember what we hear just on the previous screen? We saw the PaCO2 35 to 45, right? Okay. So if that 45 goes to 50 or 60, what is happening? Body becoming more acidic, right? Because why? Carbon dioxide is acidic. When it dissolves in water, it forms carbonic acid. That's why a patient with the asthma exacerbation, when they retain the carbon dioxide, they can go into respiratory acidosis. All right. Okay. So that's with our CO2 value. Yes. Again, carbon dioxide is an acidic substance. Okay. And whereas our next item, bicarbonate, it indicates the calculated value of the amount of bicarbonate in the bloodstream. And as we know, bicarbonate is an alkaline substance. When it is more, body goes into more alkalosis. When it is less, it goes into an acidotic state. So it means we need a certain level of bicarbonate to maintain the balance. If it is less, then also body can goes into acidosis. And then we have two more values here. So PaO2, which indicates the partial pressure of oxygen that is dissolved in arterial blood. And finally, oxygen saturation, saturation of oxygen in the arterial blood. Yes, again, we heard these 5 values, but what do we need essentially to work out our ABG questions? This is all. I mean, we just need pH, PaCO2, and bicarb. And what are they? I think we heard it a few times by this time, right? So pH is 7.35 to 45, PaCO2 is 35 to 45, and bicarb is 20 to 26. And again, this is the ABCD of ABG. And if you do not know these values memorized, then there is no meaning in further looking for our ABG interpretation. So this is the most critical part or the most important part of the ABG interpretation, knowing these values and what will happen when these values get changed.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so let's continue here. Okay, so so based on what we heard, we're going to look into 4 different conditions, like whether what we call it as uncompensated or compensated. So let's start with the uncompensated, and there are 4 different types of uncompensated acid-base derivations, as you can see here. So that include respiratory acidosis, respiratory alkalosis, metabolic acidosis, and the metabolic alkalosis. And I already gave you a couple examples. I mean, the number one, you cannot forget, I'm sure, if you're a nurse, you definitely would have worked with the patients who are asthmatic, right? So at times or periodically, they may end up in the hospital with the, with a bronchospasm and retention of the carbon dioxide, and sometimes they can end up in the ICU with the respiratory acidosis. So what is happening there? More carbon dioxide is getting retained, and I told you CO2 is an acid. So when CO2 increase, acidity increase, and when acidity increase, what happened to pH? pH will decrease, right? Okay, so because pH is a hydrogen ion concentration. Yes, that will increase when the acidity increases. Okay. And whereas respiratory alkalosis, again, we do have a long list of causes and management, which I might bring up in another lesson. But here we're just going to focus mostly on the ABG interpretation part, particularly the compensation mechanisms, etc. Yeah, so we already heard the respiratory acidosis, an example, with the COPD exacerbation, I mean asthma to be specific. Now, where can we get respiratory alkalosis? Very classic, and is super specific about this information, as I have seen in my last 20 years of experience. I mean, think about someone hyperventilating. I mean, someone anxious, someone is having a panic attack, or think about a woman going through the labor time. I mean, if her pain is not in control, she can start to have a lot of anxiety. She can start to panic, and she can start to hyperventilate. So when someone hyperventilate, what happened? So that's going to wash out the carbon dioxide. Remember, carbon dioxide, we need everything in the balance, right? Normal CO2 is 35 to 45. So when she or he starts to hyperventilate, the CO2 level goes down, right? The 35 to 45, it can go into 34, 32, 30, and so on. So it goes low. So when it goes low, body can go into a state of respiratory alkalosis. So that's where respiratory alkalosis can happen. Now, metabolic acidosis, I already probably would have told you by this time. Think about the patient in DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, right? Yes. So where the kidney is unable to get the acidic products out, I mean the ketones, right, which is formed from the ketoacidosis mechanism. The kidney cannot get it out, so that's where body can go into metabolic acidosis. And metabolic alkalosis could be from intake of alkaline substance such as, think about antacids containing soda bicarb, etc. Could be a reason for metabolic alkalosis. I mean, there could be many more reasons. Again, in the other lesson, we might talk about the causes and findings and the management more specifically. All right, so we were talking about the uncompensated conditions, and what we heard so far is what we can see exactly here in this table as a comparison. So what do we see here? So we are talking about acid-base conditions which are uncompensated. I mean, the first and foremost criteria of uncompensated, as you can see, the pH is out of normal, right? It goes either less than 7.35 or more than 7.45. So that's what you see. The pH is out of normal. Okay. And now we need to understand if the problem causing this change is if it is respiratory or metabolic. So imagine if it is respiratory. So we know the problem gets started from the carbon dioxide, isn't it? I mean, the bicarbonate goes through the lungs, right? Only the carbon dioxide. So yes, it is the carbon dioxide value which alters when it goes through respiratory acidosis, as you can see. And in that case, we are actually considering the bicarb to be within the normal limits. But it will start to change if the body starts to compensate. I will talk about that in the coming slides. So again, with respiratory acidosis, the carbon dioxide value changes, and as you can see, so take the example of bronchospasm, asthma exacerbation, carbon dioxide value increase, as you can see. When CO2 increase, pH decrease, right? Body goes into more acidosis. You can go below 7.35. And whereas with someone who is hyperventilating, the carbon dioxide value can go down and the pH can go up, or it can go above 7.45. And whereas when we go to metabolic, metabolic mechanism, whether it's acidosis or alkalosis, what do you see here? So if the problem is metabolic, we are considering the carbon dioxide level to be normal. We don't worry about the CO2 part. unless it starts to compensate. But yeah, the part we try to be concerned is the bicarbonate values. You can see, so when the bicarb decrease, the pH decrease, the body can go into metabolic acidosis. Whereas when the bicarb increase, remember bicarbonate is an alkaline substance. When its level increase, the alkalinity increase. So that's what you see here. Again, so with the metabolic, we talk about primary change, which is happening with the bicarb value, right? Yes. Whereas with the respiratory, we talk about the changes in the CO2 value as the primary mechanism, and we consider our the bicarb to be normal in case of respiratory, and PCO2 to be normal in case of metabolic. All right, I hope it's clear so far. And so what we heard so far, you can also remember with a simple clue. Here we go. Yes, you may have probably heard this, right? ROM, respiratory opposite, metabolic equal. And what does that mean? I mean, let's go back to the previous slide once more. See what is happening here. Again, if the problem is respiratory, first of all, we are only taking care of the CO2, right? And we consider bicarb to be normal. We don't consider that. And with the metabolic, the same. We are not concerned about the CO2 value. Okay. So with the respiratory, what we're talking, yeah. So why did we say respiratory opposite? You see what is happening when the CO2 increase, pH decrease. When the CO2 decrease, pH increase. You see the respiratory opposite. I mean, if the carbon dioxide goes up, the pH goes down. I mean, when pH goes down, what is that? That is acidosis. And when CO2 goes down, patient goes into high pH, which is alkalosis, right? Which is going to be respiratory alkalosis. And whereas, let's look into the metabolic one. So when bicarb decrease, the pH also decrease. When bicarb increase, the pH also increase. So this is what we heard as the ROM, right? The respiratory opposite and then metabolic equal in the same direction. That's all it means. Okay. All right. So that's another clue you can use for remembering or identifying these changes easily when you come across some questions. So now let's go into the next part, which is a compensation. I think almost everyone is pretty comfortable with if it is out of balance. I mean, if it's uncompensated, everyone can kind of identify. But I think the confusion or the challenge comes when it goes into the compensation. So let's see how we can understand and work out some questions as well as we move forward. So here is some fundamental information to start with. So what do we have here? All right, so let's see. Okay, so the first thing, remember what we're talking, the two major organs involved in the balancing are the lungs and the kidneys, right? And how does lungs work? Lungs can, when the body goes into acidosis, lungs will expel the carbon dioxide. Or when the body goes into alkalosis, it can retain more CO2. And whereas with the kidneys, the opposite, when body goes into acidosis, either it try to get the hydrogen ion out. Remember, hydrogen ion is acid. So it try to get it out, or it can produce or retain more bicarbonate. So that's what happened when there is metabolic acidosis. And whereas in alkalosis, it starts to retain the hydrogen ion and excrete the bicarb. So again, so these are the two organs involved, the lungs and kidneys. So the lungs basically works through the carbon dioxide and balancing the carbon dioxide, whereas the kidneys work through balancing the bicarbonate part. Okay. So what we just heard, let's see it with a little bit more description right here. Okay, so what we can see, the first point, yes, in acidic state, kidneys excrete hydrogen ion and reabsorb bicarb, while respiratory system gives off carbon dioxide. I mean, let's recollect the same example we heard before. I mean, DKA, didn't I say that a few times by this time? Yeah, diabetic ketoacidosis. So think about the diabetic patient, particularly the type 1 diabetes, the other one who can encounter this ketoacidosis stage, periodically if they are mismanaging their condition. So, body starts to break down the fat. It starts to release ketones. Ketones are acidic, and body goes into a state of acidosis. So that's kind of an example you can connect here. Yes. So if that happens, what will happen in the body? So in acidic state, kidneys will excrete the hydrogen ion and reabsorb by carb. So that's how it works. And now, if the problem is metabolic, like DKA is a metabolic problem, the kidneys might not be in a full functional state in that condition. So at that time, lungs try to balance, and that's where the lungs will give off the CO2. And this is what we heard before as the Kussmaul respiration. Remember the Kussmaul respiration, which is a state of hyperventilation. So what is happening here? The acidity that has been generated because of the metabolic disturbance. Now the lungs try to compensate by washing off or expelling the extra carbon dioxide, and that's what we see as the Kussmaul respiration. I hope that's clear. And whereas in alkaloid state, the next point, kidneys excrete by carb and respiratory system retains. It can keep the carbon dioxide so that its acidity will be maintained. Okay. And another important point to understand, I mean, some of the information what you see on NCLEX is so fundamental. You don't have to be a research scholar to pass NCLEX based on my experience. Things are very fundamental. As you can see, acidosis compensated by alkalosis, and alkalosis compensated by acidosis. I mean, didn't I just say that? Think about a patient with the DKA, which is a type of metabolic acidosis. So when there is an acidotic state, the correction is by alkalosis, and when there is a metabolic problem, the correction is by respiratory. You getting the point? So acidosis is corrected by alkalosis, and the metabolic problem corrected by respiratory, and vice versa. So the same example I'll refer back. DKA is a metabolic acidotic state, and to resolve the problem, what is happening? The lungs try to expel the carbon dioxide. So the acidotic state happening because of a problem with the metabolic dysfunction. Now lungs, the respiratory is trying to resolve or compensate by expelling the carbon dioxide. So when that's, remember, now CO2 is an acid, right? So when the carbon dioxide leaves the body, the acidity decreases. So again, the metabolic acidosis, which has happened because of the DKA, now the respiratory system is balancing. That's what you see here. Again, acidosis compensated by alkalosis, and alkalosis by acidosis. And metabolic problem compensated by respiratory way, as I already told you, and whereas respiratory problem compensated by metabolic way. Okay. And already explained the best example here, Kussmaul, decay with the Kussmaul respiration. All right, and let's see this state of compensation here in a table. Okay. So before we're talking the one which was uncompensated, so here we're going to talk about the compensated situation. And what do we see here? Okay, so first of all, do you see when we say compensated, the first criteria you had to look at the pH, and you can see the pH value is perfectly normal in this case, right? Yeah, so with all of those, the pH is normal. So so which includes the first one, compensated metabolic acidosis, then compensated metabolic alkalosis, compensated respiratory acidosis, and compensated respiratory alkalosis. Those are the four conditions, which are being presented as compensated here. Okay. And now the confusion happens with the compensation because a lot of times you will see, the pH is definitely with the normal, as you can see. So you don't have to really worry about the pH part directly. But then you can see the other two values are changing. But now if you compare back with the uncompensated, remember the pH is out of normal and either only PCO2 or bicarb change. But here you can see they both are going out of normal, right? So that's, you can see, the pH, yes. So let's take the first one again here. So compensated metabolic acidosis. So what is happening? I mean, by the way, you can see I have made a note here, first and second. And what does that mean? So when I say first, that's a primary change. That's a triggering problem. We are talking about a metabolic disturbance. Remember, when we say metabolic, I mean, bicarbonate cannot go to the lungs, right? It always goes to the kidneys. So the problem starts with the bicarbonate alteration, which is happening in the kidneys. And when that happens, now lungs try to compensate, and lungs will expel the CO2. I mean, this is what we just heard as a Kussmaul respiration. See, let it be the same example. DKA, the acidity increases. I mean, the bicarb value decreases. With the decay bicarb will be less than 22. Remember, the normal is 22 to 26. It goes below 22. It may go into 20, 80, and so on. So, and in order to reduce that acidity happening because of that, now lungs will try to balance by washing out the CO2, and we have already heard that's what is the small respiration or the hyperventilation part. And whereas with the second one, compensated metabolic alkalosis, yeah, so the bicarb is going up. Yeah, that's the first change. Body is kind of going into an alkalotic state. And in order to reduce that alkalinity, then the body starts to retain more carbon dioxide. And how can it do that? Just simply reduce the respiratory rate. When the respiratory rate decreases, I mean, if imagine the normal is 12 or 16, so if that decreases by 2 or 4, the body will retain more carbon dioxide. So this is kind of exactly how you will find the information in the questions when you come across them in the NCLEX questions or in other nursing exams. Yes, so you had to see, what is the first change that is happening. Again, we're talking about a patient with metabolic alkalosis in this state. Body is going to go into a state of increased alkalinity. And to how will it compensate? As I told you, to compensate, body needs more carbon dioxide. So simply reduce the respiratory rate. So that's what you see here. Okay. And in fact, no, that doesn't work here. I'll go into that when we go down. Okay. So let's go into the next one, the compensated respiratory acidosis. So yes, so when we say respiratory acidosis, remember the trigger, the starting is from the change in the carbon dioxide value, right? Yeah, the CO2 starts to change. Yeah, the body starts to retain more carbon dioxide. Again, go back to the same example, situation we called it, asthma exacerbation, body is going to retain the carbon dioxide and it can go into respiratory acidosis. Now, the kidneys can try to resolve the problem by retaining more bicarbonate. Remember, bicarbonate is alkali, right? Alkaline substance. So by keeping more of that, the acidity can get neutralized. And finally, in compensated respiratory alkalosis, what is happening? So this is the case probably we're talking. Think about that woman in labor who is hyperventilating, or someone in severe pain or in panic attacks starting to hyperventilate. So what is happening? The carbon dioxide get washed out, right? The CO2 level goes down. So body goes into state of respiratory alkalosis. And to balance that or to reduce the alkalinity which is happening from that reason, now the kidneys can expel or wash out some bicarbonate. I mean, when bicarb leaves, acidity increases, right? Yeah, I mean, bicarbonate is an alkaline substance. When there is more of that, alkalinity increase. When it decreases, acidity increase. So yeah, the alkalinity which has been happening here because of the hyperventilation or similar mechanisms, the kidneys will resolve by expelling some bicarbonate or by lowering that. So that's what you see here as a compensation. All right, so hope you're getting a good sense of acid-base alteration. Again, a lot of people get challenged when it comes into the compensated part, but we do have some other techniques or tactics we could see to effectively overcome or resolve this compensatory mechanism confusion. And also, when we talk about compensation, something I didn't tell you yet. So the compensation can happen in different degrees. I mean, either is uncompensated, as we already heard, uncompensated and compensated. So the compensated itself, you can see it could be partial or full or complete. Okay, so let's see what it means. Okay, when we move forward, we're going to see a clear picture of each of these conditions, and that will help us understand and answer the related questions. And here we go. So this is the major thing we want to talk here, the use of Tic Tac Toe method to answer the acid-base questions. I mean, some of you, or maybe many of you know what is Tic Tac Toe. I mean, kids love playing Tic Tac Toe, right? Okay, so maybe you would have played that as you were a kid too, right? So what do we do? So yeah, maybe two of you are playing, you put your X here. Yeah, the other person put their O here, and then you put another X here. Other person go for an O here. You put one more X. Okay, you got it. You are the winner, right? So that's what the tic-tac-toe is. I mean, the tic-tac-toe we talk here has nothing to do with this, but rather we are going to see our pH, pGO2, and bicarb values distributed into these three columns. That's what we're going to see here. Here we go. So this is the tic tac toe we're going to use here. So as you can see, yeah, it has those three columns. Yeah, the first one acidic, and then normal, and then basic, or what we call as alkaline. And let's go to the next one to make it better and clearer. Okay. So for example, yeah, we already know the three values we consider are the pH, pGO2, and bicarbonate. And what I have given here, these are the normal values. Again, I told you, knowing this, that's the first and foremost thing, right? Okay. If you do not know that, working or looking into the rest of them would be meaningless. So make sure we know these values for sure. Okay. So, and whatever values you get here, for example, if your pH is an acidic value, so what you're going to do, if your pH, let the pH be 7.2, okay, we know that's acidic, right? We're going to put the pH here. So pH is acidic. Now, if the pCO2, if it is, remember, what is normal, 35 to 45, right? If it suppose it's a 50 or 60, so we know that pCO2 is going to go here, right? So that's also acidic. And imagine your bicarb is 23. So we know 23 is here. 23 is a normal value, right? It's coming between 22 to 26. So that goes here. So the bicarb comes here. Okay, so again, I didn't give you a specific number. I'm just giving an example how it's going to be applied, right, with the tic tac toe and the values we can look and see. So this is how we will distribute it. And let's move to the further pages and to get a better picture how exactly this could be applied and interpreted for effective analysis and finding the right value for the given situation. All right, and so yes, this is a tic tac toe, and one other thing you can see, okay, I call it probably like a pH scale or a pH meter. I mean, what we're going to do with this, I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically on this as we move further forward. Okay, so again, yes, I mean, what do we see here? We know the normal pH range 7.35 to 45, right? Okay, so 7.35 to 45, where 7.4. So that's the perfect center, right? So that's the perfect center. And I probably mentioned before, remember, so even though it is between 7.35 to 4.45, if it is going towards 7.35, that means it's kind of leaning or inclining towards the acidosis side. And same, if it is going up, it's going to go towards alkalosis, even though it could be within the normal. So this, this certified pH scale or the pH meter will be of use if our given value is compensated, and we'll see a specific significance as we move forward with help of some examples. Now let's start with okay, again, where do we get these values, this range, everything? We already had this, right? Remember 7.4, that's our perfect number, up to 4.5, that is normal, and up to 3.5, 7.35 to 4.5. So more than 4.5, yeah, that's our alkalosis, and less than 3.5, that's our acidosis. And we know, yeah, body cannot function, right, with those values. Yeah, we already heard this. So let's look here. Okay, so we have this value right here, right? So pH 7.19, pCO2 35, bicarb 14. So we should start understanding what each of these values are, right? If they are acidic, basic, or normal, right? That's what we need to know. I mean, I'm sure everyone know the pH 7.19. That's an acidic, right? That's a significantly acidic. It should be 7.35 to 4.5. So 7.19, that is significantly acidic. And pCO2 35. I mean, what is the normal range of pCO2? 35 to 45. So when it goes into 35, it is within range, which is within normal, but is right there at the borderline, right? It is close to the alkalosis. And whereas bicarbonate 14, we know that is significantly or severely in an acidic state. So the same values we're going to look and interpret with the help of our tic tac toe, which we already know. Here we go. So I just put those values which you saw on the previous page here on the screen. And what you see on the other side, they are the normal values. Here we go. So those are the normal values. Yes, we are pretty familiar, right? By this time, yes. And so let us use these values to do our tic-tac-toe. And by the way, right now, we are not going to use the one on the top, I mean, our pH scale. We don't need that necessarily here, but we can look only into the tic-tac-toe part. So let's see, the first value, pH 7.19, pH 7.19. I already mentioned the value is acidic, isn't it? So we're going to put that pH value right here. So pH goes here. Now, PCO2 35, is that acidic or alkaline? It is not either. It is normal, right? It is 35 to 45. So it is still within the range. So the PCO2 is going to come here in that case. And what about the bicarb? So bicarb is 14. So bicarb 14, I mean, what is our normal value? 22 to 26. So bicarb 14, so less than 22, it is acidic. So we're going to put the bicarbonate here. So what is the interpretation of this given situation? So the given situation, first of all, you definitely know it is uncompensated. That's why the pH is under the acidic, right? It is 100% is acidosis. And what is the underlying reason? Because the bicarb is too low. So bicarb is too low and the pH is down. So that's what is metabolic acidosis. And is uncompensated. And why do I say it is uncompensated? If it is compensated, or if there is an effort to compensate, you will see the PCO2 value moving to the opposite side. I'm going to get a better picture as we move further. Yes, again, so here the given situation is uncompensated metabolic acidosis. And yeah, the PCO2 is normal. If it was getting compensated, as I told you, the PCO2 will move to the opposite side.